So, I am so happy to see people, uh, former Quinceyites, uh, people that I've talked to online and been supporting me when I've been doing this, and to finally see you here means I can't describe how much it means to me. Writing this book was one, it was very emotional for me because, as we all know, memories, some are wonderful, some are not so wonderful, but it doesn't matter, right? And what's great is you all connected to them. And that's what makes me so happy, is that my stories seem to rekindle stories of other people. And there's nothing that I like to hear more than other people's stories. So I tell people, I was merely a character in this book, but my stories about me are really stories about all of us and everyone sitting here. We've all had a tragic time in our lives. We've all had perhaps your mother and your father are still with you, and I hope so, right? But we've all had some wonderful memories of a mother and dad. And all of my story shows how we're so much more connected than we are apart. And I think especially today, and especially where it seems all the turmoil and all what's going on today, that and the reason why I wrote my stories is I hope that these stories can start to bring us back together. And I think all of us have stories inside of us. And I think all of us need to share our stories. So 2 years ago, I walked downstairs to my basement and I saw some photo albums that were just dusty and sitting in a corner. And so I grabbed them and I walked back upstairs and I sat down. And I started looking at the photo albums and I realized they were just depictions of memories, of wonderful times and wonderful friends. And many of them in this wonderful city, especially in the 60s and 70s. This city was special. And I think any of us who were part of that, I think would agree with that. And so I started to write a story, trying to get away from the current events and all the things that 2 years ago, even some of the things that I said, I just need to get away from things. I just need to write just a short story, and I shared it on Facebook. And somebody said, "Oh, thank you for writing that. And it reminds me of this." And they told me their story. And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And then someone else did the same thing. And I said, "Well, that's nice. Maybe I'll write another." And my stories are short because some of our memories are short, right? Some of the most precious memories we have are short, but they mean so much to us. And do we ever wonder why our mind, when we never know why, seems to take a snapshot of a moment? And it might be years later that it comes back to us. And you say, "Wow, I wonder why I remember that." It comes back to us, it seems, in a time when we need the story, when we need the memory, because it meant so much. And there were always lessons involved with stories. If we really think of them, our memories had lessons, right? Well, the lesson was about love. If the lesson was about loss, right? There's so many stories, happy stories, friends, unforgettable friends. How many people had an unforgettable friends? Everybody? Unforgettable friends, right? Why not write about your unforgettable friends, right? Some of them have died, if you've read my stories, but some of them are still here. And I've written about both. And that means they need to hear my story because I hold them in such high regard for certain reasons. Some of those reasons might be something like a person was so humble. He was walking humility when I think of Steve Carrera, I wrote this story about someone I played football with a long time ago. And I think we need to know that. What was it that made Steve so humble? What qualities did he have that made him so special that I would remember that? And Steve's still alive. And so I had to write a story, right? And then I had stories, unfortunately, of friends who passed. But they meant so much to me. And those friends never really die in our minds. They're just no longer here. And so why do we hold that sorrow and whatever we feel? Why do we hold that inside of us? Why not write it down? Why not share it with people so people can understand? I need to, tonight, as we're talking, I'm going to ask you for some of your stories. So if you're going to ask me to read a little part of my book, the next question I'm going to ask is there a story here that somebody has or a remembrance that you'd like to talk about? Because if my stories can rekindle yours, then I think my stories are successful, right? Stephen Moffat said, in the end, we are all stories. And that's the truth. So if I tell you my stories, you have to tell yours. If you've been holding memories inside, you need to release them. So when I looked at those albums, and I looked at all those pictures, right? They need to come alive again. They need to be shared with our families, right? With our friends. If you think there's a friend that you have that you really like for whatever reason, and there is a story, right? It might not be a long one. Write the person a letter. Send them a message, send them a text, her, him, and tell them, you know what? I've always admired you. I've always liked you because of this. You have this quality that I find that is so special. Tell them now while they're alive, while they can hear it, and they can say, well, oh, thank you, I didn't know that. Because so many times they don't know that, right? So anyways, I always wonder, why do we take our stories or our pictures and we put them in the catacombs, cellars, attics, and worse, in our minds? We bury them in our minds. And so I hope, if nothing else, my stories tell us all, bring them back to life. Share them with your kids. Share them with your friends. And tell your stories. I tell you mine, you tell me yours, it rekindles theirs. And the stories, they go on in just the way it was always meant to be, right? So that's why I wrote it. And I wasn't going to write a book. And I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anybody. I wrote the first story on a telephone with one thumb, right? I'm not even a two-thumb guy, right? So it was one thumb. And when I was writing the story on the telephone, I put it in notes, right? When I was writing the story on the telephone, I was connected to the story. There was something about holding a telephone and touching the screen. And all of a sudden, I was reliving all of those moments that I was writing about. I felt like I was there. And people have said, I feel like I'm there in your stories. Well, it's because I'm there. I'm in my stories. My girlfriend, she would come in and she'd hear me laughing. And she would say, what are you laughing about? Oh, I'm just writing a story. Sometimes she'd come in, she'd hear me sobbing. What's wrong, honey? I said, I'm just writing a story, right? Do people know here Jim Valvano? Jim Valvano, yeah. Jim Valvano was a great basketball coach for North Carolina, I believe, and he was dying of cancer. And he said, and this was just weeks before he passed, and obviously he knew he was going to pass, and he says, if we can do three things in a day, if we can laugh, if we can think, and if we can cry, what a wonderful day. Well, I can tell you, in writing these stories, I was laughing, thinking and crying a whole lot, right? And I try and think when I go to bed at night, and I'm not always successful, did you laugh? Did you think? And did you cry? Did you bring yourself to emotions? You don't have to bawl, but did you bring yourself to some emotions where you felt something, where your spirit inside you felt like it got lifted up, and for whatever reason? And that's so important, I think, for all of us, right? So anyways, my book is 90 memories. 90 memories. And there was no really rhyme or reason, but we all have these memories. And I said, gee, that was kind of funny when John Bonfiglio, who owned the funeral home, Bonfiglio's, when he walked into Alfredo's and pulled out a tape measure and started measuring all these people, and he didn't even know it. Right? They didn't even know what he was doing. I did. I was sitting in a booth, and I was laughing, and pretty soon they're going, what? And they all knew who John was, and they said, get away from me, and they told him some other things and what they could do with that tape measure, right? And when I thought back of it, when I think back of it, all those people have passed. Isn't that who we are? We know that one day we're not going to be here, right? And yet we laugh, and we have frivolity. We enjoy this time that's here. And that's why that came back to me, is I looked at that and I said, wow, the whole place was laughing. Pretty soon, the tape measure, everybody's measuring all gosh knows what, and they're walking around with the tape measure, and they're laughing. And so my story kind of was, it happened at Alfredo's, the bar downstairs. And I think if you read my stories, I lived in the apartments above Alfredo's restaurant, right? And so we all have tape measures, most of us. And let's put them aside for another day, right? And we all have Alfredo's bars. We do. We have a cadre of friends and people that we enjoy, whether it's with a drink or just sitting beside each other, right? So let's always have that. That means so much to me. So my question is, I told you I would do this, right? Is there a story? How many people have actually read the book? Can I ask? Oh, so there's a few. Very nice. Is there a particular story that you related to? Now, if you raise your hand, I'm going to remember. So can I ask you? Yes.
I was just glancing at it. I haven't read the book, but I saw
Okay.
you talked a lot about Paragon Park
Ah,
and Nantasket Beach. That was a special place for my father and me, and he would take all my friends with us, for the drive out to Nantasket for the day, take us all to Paragon Park after staying on the beach. We didn't sit on the over by the rocks though. We went into the resident where the houses started.
oh, that's awesome. What a great memory.
It was nice that all my friends remember that, though. My friends that, my closest friends, they all came with us.
And I call that story Salt and Pepper, because they both went together so well, right? Where would the beach be without the amusement park? Where would the amusement park be without the beach? How lucky were we that both were right beside each other back then and we could enjoy it? And so, yeah, I thought people would relate to that. That's a wonderful memory, and it ties you to your dad and your friends. And that's something you'll never forget. And I'm glad my story was able to bring that up for you. How about somebody else? Is there a story that, come on, I'm talking of here, so you have to say something. There's no having a camera on you, see? So is there a story that meant something? Yes? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yes.
All of your stories mean something, but I was wondering if you would read one of your stories to all of us. Not just excerpts, maybe a whole one. I know they're not really long. Come on.
Okay.
One of my favorites was Wingman, and if everyone here is old enough to remember,
Does, do- does everyone remember Mike the Winger? Okay. What a joy he was. Talk, can you tell me what page that's on, just so I can quickly go to that? I know you have yours marked. Do you know what page that is on? Yeah. If I don't read it all, I'll read part of it. I don't wanna bore people, but Mike was like his own playground, right? As soon as he came, everybody would come to him. Everybody would gather around him. Everybody would have a smile on his face, right? And though he was challenged, you wouldn't know it. He made everybody happy. He was special, right? So do you know what page that is? No. 158. Okay.
158.
Okay. So 158. I don't want to bore you. So, okay. So I have to now put on, I had my glasses. If I don't have my glasses, I'm in trouble. Yes. So, Wingman, that's what I called him. I didn't know him well. I'm not sure many people did. I knew his first name, like so many others, but not sure many knew his last. Nobody seemed to know where he lived, and it didn't seem important. Maybe that was part of what made him so special. Always a smile on his face, he was welcomed whenever he would haphazardly appear. A park or a street corner, it didn't matter. Immediately word would spread that Mike was here, and a crowd soon gathered around him. The chants and perhaps a few good-natured taunts would begin, and his smile would seem to grow wider. We all knew his nickname, which described his odd habit. Mike the Winger was a storied figure of my youth. He was best known for winging records. Not that he had a great ability to sail them far or make them turn and flip in some magical way. None of that seemed to matter. He just liked to wing them. And that's what was so special. Jack how do you say that, his name? Encarnaco, a writer for the Patriot Ledger, might have said it best when he wrote, he was the Pied Piper of Quincy. And he was, right? I always wondered why kids were so drawn to him, and finally decided it was his smile. We all understood that he was mentally challenged, but that didn't seem important when you were in his presence. Once you joined the crowd, his smile took center stage, and we all felt joy at ease in his company. He was a little kid in a young man's body. On many occasions, Mike didn't show up with records to toss. That didn't stop a crowd from gathering. People would pepper him with questions about bands and artists and their round vinyl recording discs. Two questions were most prevalent. Any band or artist could be substituted. Mike, what do you do with the Beatles? His answer was always the same, you wing it. If interested in his opinion of a band or artist and their records, many asked, Mike, what do you think of the Beatles? His familiar retort, they gotta go. Which meant, of course, their records should be tossed to the winds. Everyone knew his answers, but it didn't matter. We reveled in asking and hearing his childlike, joyous, and innocent responses. It was if he had brought his own playground with him wherever he went. So many stories exist about Mike and his tosses and how and where the records landed, yet I only witnessed one toss, a Glenn Miller LP, I think, which resulted in a shattered disc in a gas station parking lot on Franklin Street. The memory of that toss remains unbroken within me. That's the only time I saw his smile momentarily replaced by a grimace. And it occurred to me the instant he winged it. It was as if he felt a need to make it extraordinary. He didn't. For me, the toss was anticlimactic, and it was only when his smile returned that mine did too. Some kids teased him, and I heard that others took advantage of his condition. I never witnessed that, and I believe most older kids would not let that happen in their presence. Mike was one of our own personal treasures, and Quincy kids always protected their own. Recently, I found out his name was Michael Zadrusny. Did I say that right? I want to make sure I get that right. And he died in 1977. Not sure about you, but I hate to hear things like that. Sometimes someone lives and creates their own special distinction and admiration within us. And I prefer it to remain that way, their own special immortality bestowed by us onto them. As far as his real name, he will always remain Mike the Winger to me. I'm going to go just to the end now, just so we need more Mikes in the world today. Someone that would bring us back together again for a short time, make us forget about our differences. There are days I wish he would magically reappear. And as he passed me on his bicycle, I'd like to ask him one more question. Hey, Mike, what do you do with a remarkable man and a life that brought laughter and fun to so many? I think he might stop, look over his shoulder, a bit confused, and then that big smile would steal his face, and he'd yell back, "They gotta go." Yes, sadly they do. Or maybe his answer would be, "Yeah, wing it." That he did uniquely and beautifully. And that's Mike the Winger. How could we ever forget? So again, Mike the Winger, just a special person, right? A special innocent that that was part of our young lives in a special city. How special was our city? Did anybody here skid hop? Yeah, I have a lady there. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, skid hopping was grabbing on the back of a bumper, right? And then going down the road. The police didn't like it very much. Yeah, right? Skeeching, they might have called it too.
Colorado, we call it
Skeeching. Wow. Right. How many people went to the quarries? Yeah. Yeah. Did any of those raise their hands? Any high jumpers here? Oh, the intrepid ones. It took me a 6-pack of beer to go off a 35-foot ledge. So I wasn't that. My brother was, but I was not. So, remember the parks? Do you remember our parks were supervised? And everybody would go to the park. Everybody would meet their friends in the park. We'd wake up in the morning, you know, where are you going? I'm going to the park, right? That's all. Do you remember when our neighbors would watch us, right? If we did anything wrong when we came home, our dads and mothers sure knew about it, you know, because everybody was watching. What a great time. What a wonderful. We had beaches, right? We had the quarries. We had all these things to do, and we had so many friends, right? And I hope this brings back that time of this city back into your memories and into your lives. Another story, I won't read the whole thing, but another story that might have impacted somebody. Is there any story that one can think of? So, what I'm going to do is read you something. It's just not going to be long. This is when I brought the albums upstairs, and I started looking at all the pictures. And so I wrote about it. Flipping through the pages, I was amazed how many memories were attached and immortalized within each photo. Staring at a picture, I would close my eyes and feel myself move into that time and place depicted. And if I stilled all which lay upheaved and disheveled inside myself, familiar voices long since lost and silence would return once again and reverberate inside of me. Time releases dominion over me as I lost myself within those things I thought forever subdued by the passage of my years. It was then that what seemed an obvious revelation reoccurred to me. These photos were just a physical manifestation of what already lay reposed inside of me, my memories, your memories. So, there's nothing special that you can think of that. I wrote some stories about my, yes, please, Danny.
I was gonna say, I enjoyed all your stories, Pat, but I
Yeah.
particularly enjoyed the stories when you referenced, you mentioned your dad.
Yeah,
Blue collar, stoic, rough and tumble concept.
yeah, yeah,
Want to repeat myself?
yes,
Yeah, I really enjoy the stories when you reference your dad and make mention of him being the blue collar, rough and tumble, stoic individual that he was. I can relate to that. And that, again, all your stories bring us back, but that one in particular, those in particular, bring me back.
yeah. Many of our dads, I bet, in this room worked in the shipyard, right? I worked in the shipyard one summer. There's a story in there about that. And for those men to try and feed their families and work in those conditions and the work they did was incredible, right? And I think my dad told me to work that summer because he wanted me to learn a lesson. What do you want to do in life? And not work in the shipyard, right? So yeah, stories about my dad. I wasn't brought up by a mom, and my dad brought us up. So he was a hero to me, and he brought up 3 kids on his own, right? And so I have many. And then when I said I was alone on my phone writing the stories, believe me, when I was writing about my dad, they were tough, right? Because once again, you feel like you're right there. So yeah, he was very special, a man's man, a rugged man. And it reminds me of one thing. Do you remember you always wanted to tell your mom or your dad, and maybe you got the opportunity, that you love them? Back in those days, it didn't happen that much. It was very hard to do. For a son to tell his dad that he loved him, not like today. Today it seems wonderfully, today it seems it's something easy for us to do. Back then it was difficult. I remember one time I was sitting beside my dad at Alfredo's, and I was sitting there, and I said, I am going to tell him I love him. I don't know how I'm going to tell him I love him, but I'm going to tell him I love him, right? And so I started, and I go, so Dad, yeah, you know, huh? I said, well, Dad, you, and I just couldn't, right? And my dad saved me. He looked at me and he goes, Pat, I know. Huh? That was my attempt, right, to tell him. Yeah. And I think that might ring familiar with some of us there, right? And then I had a precocious sister. Did anybody have a precocious sibling?
I did.
Yeah.
For all my other.
So I had to grow up in the shadow of a precocious sister who could sing, dance, act, and get straight A's at her will. And then I had to follow her, and in front of all the teachers at Sterling Junior High School and Quincy High School, the expectations for Linda's little brother. Oh, it's Linda's little brother. And I'd be like, oh, God, no, please. Right? Yeah. I thought a C was an A, and I thought a B was a mistake. So it didn't take them long to understand that I didn't come equipped with all of my sister's attributes, right? But it was wonderful. And then there's a story in there about the car she left me, and I think it was a trick that she left me this car. And it's kind of a funny story. Every time I read it, I still laugh. It was a Nash Rambler, right? That she told me not too long ago that she initiated just for me when she got sick with some wine in the back seat and failed to wash it out. So when I was driving this car, which caused me nothing but trouble, right? I always thought there was an odd smell. And I tried fresheners. I tried all kinds of things. And I sprayed more things and more powders and everything else, and I couldn't figure it out. Well, about 40, 50 years later, Linda finally told me, what it was. And then she said she made me a promise, right? She made me pay $1 for the car. I said, why am I paying $1? You're not using it anymore. You're going off to college. Just give me the car. Well, no. There's fiscal responsibility. She was my older sister. And older sisters have to teach their younger brothers fiscal responsibility. So please, pay $1. And then, when you sell it, I want you to sell it for $1. Well, I didn't sell it. And there's a nice story in there. I think you'll enjoy it, and it's humorous. What I did was I had it crushed. And I wouldn't dare ask $1 from anybody when I had it crushed. And when I told Linda some 50 years later, and Linda, fiscal responsibility, that $1? Yeah, I stole it from your room. So that was my way of getting her back. But anyways, so there's a sundry of stories and so many tales, but I think each one of them would be one that you'd relate to. And that's what I hope. And I hope my stories rekindle your own. And I'd like to end this with a simple thing that I wrote. And I've probably already said here, but I wrote this. And this is my philosophy. And it's at the end. It's the last story. And the last story is called Endings. And the first thing I say in this story is I don't believe in endings. I think everyone tries to have one. Some are good, some are bad. But I just don't believe in them, right? But I do believe in stories. Stories do not always have happy endings, and that's okay. For in every life lives a fable, replete with dreams, fairies, angels, ogres, and villains. Yet each also is filled with love, lessons, and wisdom. Our many-colored stories should always thrive. I will tell mine, which will evoke yours, and those who hear yours will rekindle theirs, and they in turn will tell their own, and the chain of our stories will be forever unbroken, just the way it was always meant to be. And that's how the book will end. And I hope I imparted some of that to you, right? Tell your stories, write your stories, right? We all need stories today. We all need to get away from what's happening in our world. And we need to remember the wonderful things that have happened in our lives. But that's it. That's all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Questions? Any questions? Yes.
Where do you live now?
I live in Windsor. I actually say the R now. It's S-O-R. It should be Windsor, right? But I live in Windsor, Colorado. And I've been in Colorado since 1977. Yeah. But I'm always a Quincy guy. Right? Yes.
When you went to Colorado, did your father feel like you left him? Did you feel?
My father didn't feel like I left him, but it's a great question because I felt like I abandoned him. He died suddenly, and then I left, and I went to Colorado. And so a man that raised 3 kids on his own and never abandoned us, I always felt like I abandoned him. So there's a story in there where I visit his grave, and it was a very tough story for me to write. But especially showing up as an old man to your dad's grave, and I think that you think they can see us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, oh my gosh, he's seeing this old man walk up to him, and I'm his son. What's that like, right? So anyways, that was a tough time. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, did you move to Colorado to, oh, I'm sorry, hi, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you move to Colorado to go to college or to work for Ball Aerospace, or what brought you to move to Colorado?
So there's a story in the book called Two Guys in a Van, all right? And I know there's one person here that knows Don Uvanetti very well. Maybe his sister is here. Hi, Diane. Hi. And so one day, I was playing a softball game. It was after college, and I went to Boston State College. I was playing a softball game, and Don was done with college, and a John Denver song came on. So I told Don, I says, Don, I'm going to go to Colorado someday. Little did I know, Don is one of these guys that just gets things done, right, Don? And so Don says, well, do you want to go? I said, yeah, sure, right? Stay up late, we had a few beers. The next morning, I get a phone call, early. It's Don. All right, about that Colorado trip, we better get started. So we did. And probably about 6 months later, we took a year-long trip inside a van, and I think Diane made some curtains for that van. We had all kinds of stuff in that van. We worked manpower jobs, and we had the greatest year of my life, probably, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I ended up in Boulder, Colorado. I loved it. We even spent 3 months there out of the year. And when we went back, after 6 months, Don said he was going to teach history. Well, Don turned into an executive at an insurance company. He did very, very well, right? And I told Don, I said, well, Don, I'm going back. And I put everything I owned into a duffel bag, and I got on a train. I went back to Boulder, Colorado. So that's how I ended up there. Yeah, yeah.
Smart choice.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions?
Is this your first book?
It's my first book, and my old English teacher, Tom Hall, who couldn't be here today, he wants me to write a novel. And he loved the book, and he says, Pat, you have to write a character-based novel. I know it seems like a daunting task, and yes, it seems like a daunting task, because I am not the most organized guy in the world. I'm not one of those guys that writes outlines and plot lines that intersect and do all these things. I'm spontaneous, right? And I just write, right? And so I have started, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish, maybe. I've started a novel, and it'll be a fictional novel, and we'll see where it goes. Yes?
Don't get a character based on Jungle Ed.
I'm not sure there could be a character name. Has anybody heard of Jungle Ed Reynolds? John, he lived by you, by the way, just so you know. You did? You knew Jungle? You knew the name Jungle Ed? Jungle was quite the guy. And I have a story in there called There's a Jungle Inside of Me.
Yeah.
And that's about my time with Ed. Ed passed. And he'll be missed, but he was a very unique character. He lived up to his name. Anything else? Yes, Dan.
You obviously have a gift for that. Did you ever take any creative writing courses or anything, or is it something that just comes natural?
Well, yeah, I was going to be, what I thought I was going to do, and then life got in the way, is I thought I was going to teach English, and I was going to coach football. And then I ended up at Ball Aerospace in consulting with the government auditors about compliance issues. So life does funny things sometimes. And I'm not sure how we end up where we end up sometimes, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, yes. Yes, Dan.
Speaking of coaching football, is that picture of you running with the Buffaloes?
No, it's not. Yeah, because I would have been probably about 45 when that picture, and to run with a buffalo, even at 45, I couldn't keep up with it. It's amazing the shape, the buffalo at CU, University of Colorado. Those people train all year. It's amazing to run with the buffalo. It's an amazing feat. No, I wish it was. I wish it was, yeah. Anything else? You know what? I'm so happy that you all came. I can't express to you how happy this makes me. It is so nice. Again, we have so much in common. We all do. And I hope we work through the times that we're working through now, and somehow, some way, we find our way back to each other. I think that would be a great thing. But thank you.